David Peterson pitched an absolute gem. Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor led an offensive outburst, and the Mets snapped their 4-game losing streak. Was this the game that got the Mets season back on track? I'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, it might sound crazy, but I really felt like going into the game on Wednesday night, it was must-win for the New York Mets. At the top of the week, I said this team needs to win 5 games this week. And essentially, the breakdown of that in my mind was beat the A's in this first series and sweep the Marlins over the weekend. I really believe that the Mets have to take advantage of what is on paper their easiest week left of the season, and that is taking into account the fact that the A's have been playing really good baseball. But you still look at that lineup, that bullpen, that rotation, and you can't tell me that they are a better team than the Mets on paper, and you're playing at home. You got to find a way to win games, especially after losing in such brutal fashion in the first game of the series. So it was imperative that the Mets got off to a good start, and David Peterson deserves all the credit in the world. While Pete Alonso got 4 hits, Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso both homered, a lot of guys are to thank for this victory. David Peterson's the MVP of this game because he kept the Mets in it early. He did not let it get away from them at all. He kept the A's at bay. He allowed just 1 hit through the first 5 innings and did not allow a run. So he just consistently, inning after inning, he might have walked a guy here and there, but he just put up 0 after 0 after 0 because the Mets didn't score 6 runs in the first. It took some time. They finally got 1 on the board in the second inning. That was the start of it all. Jesse Winker gets a leadoff hit and very emphatically does that celebration we've seen the Mets do all year, the swipe of the hand. Tries to get his teammates fired up. Pete Alonso responds with a base hit right after that. Later on in the inning, Mark Vientos rips a double down the third base line to score Winker, and the Mets were able to get on the board. But even with that double, the Mets had 2 runners in scoring position with 1 out, and they stranded them. So you still didn't feel completely confident that this team was going to break through offensively. Now, the following inning, Francisco Lindor leads things off with a home run, his 100th of his Mets career. Pete Alonso in the 4th inning leads off that frame with a home run. So now Peterson is working with the 3-0 lead, and he did a great job with that. He did give up a run in the 6th inning, but it was unearned. Gives up a leadoff double, gets a ground ball to Francisco Lindor. Miguel Andujar, who hit the double, was trying to run to third. Should have been an out at third base as Lindor makes the throw over there, but it's a bad throw. It gets by Vientos. Everyone's safe. Runners at first and third, nobody out. And Peterson again just buckles down. He ends up giving up a run on a sacrifice fly, but again, an unearned run. Got a strikeout first. Then you had the sac fly, gets out of the inning, allowing just that 1 run. Goes back out there in the 7th inning, and he gets the first out, gives up a base hit, gets pulled from the game, and he was pissed. He was pissed that he got pulled, and you love that. You love that competitive spirit from David Peterson, who I didn't even put his pitch count on my notes here. I believe he was still in the 80s on his pitch count, but Carlos Mendoza, we've seen him have a hook on Peterson at about that pitch count. I don't know if there's any data that suggests pitches 90 through 100 are worse for David Peterson, or a guy that has a propensity to walk guys. You don't want to put the tying run on base. I think that was probably more what was in Carlos Mendoza's mind. So he gets Huascar Brazoban out of the bullpen, and Brazoban gets a double play ball. So the Mets get through 7 with that 3-1 lead. And you see Reed Garrett warming up. You're like, all right, Reed Garrett to Edwin Diaz. It's going to be a nail biter, but hey, at least the Mets are in position to win a game. But that's when the bats finally came through. The Mets exploded in the bottom of the 7th inning. They benefited from 3 straight walks to lead off the inning, but those were good at bats. You do have to credit the hitters a little bit there. Francisco Lindor comes up, bases loaded situation, doesn't try to do too much. He gets a base hit to drive in 1. There's a wild pitch that scores in another. Then a sacrifice fly from Brandon Nimmo gets a 3rd run in. JD Martinez rips a double for the 4th run. Harrison Bader gets an infield hit. And then Pete Alonso doubles in both Bader and JD Martinez. And the Mets have a 6-run inning. They end up winning the game 9-1. Pete Alonso 4 for 4 with 3 RBIs, which was a very welcome sight. Francisco Lindor was a 2 for 5 with the big hit with the bases loaded and the solo home run. And again, David Peterson just continuing to put together what has been an absolutely fantastic season for him. He's making me feel a lot better about what happened last year, because for those of you who've been listening to this show for a couple years now, after 2022, where David Peterson had a really strong season, I got out in front of it where I was talking about Peterson going into the year, and I said, I believe this guy's the potential to be a number 3 starter for the New York Mets. And I think we're going to see it this season. This is going into 2023. Well, as you all remember, David Peterson did not have a great season. Ended up getting demoted at points. It was just a bad year. But now we know, armed with hindsight, I say hindsight there, armed with hindsight, we know that David Peterson was dealing with a hip injury all year and was probably never feeling right. He gets the surgery. He misses the first part of this season, but now he is healthy. He's in a really good form, and he's showing you his potential. David Peterson has solidified a spot in the Mets rotation for seemingly years to come with what he has done during this stretch. His ERA is at 3.04, and he's 7-1, which I know we don't care about records that much anymore, but I don't know. When you watch Peterson and the way that Mets have played behind him, and sometimes that's just good fortune, but it does feel like there's a little bit of that vibe when he's on the mound that the Mets are going to win that day, because that's what's been happening. So I can't give Peterson enough credit for this one. They needed a stopper, and he got that level of a start for the Mets. Now it's up to Jose Quintana to complete this series victory. I will also note the Mets got a huge break because Brent Rooker went on paternity leave. So the hottest hitter in the A's lineup, one of the hottest hitters in all of baseball, will not be there for the rest of this series. That was huge for the Mets. Congratulations to Brent Rooker. Perfect timing. Thank you. But the Mets have to finish off this series and then build on it and have a great series against the Marlins over the weekend, because the Braves, they keep on winning. And we will talk about the Braves in the final segment. But before I get into that, I want to discuss Pete Alonso's breakout game here, and if he can be that Robin we were talking about last week for Francisco Lindor. Can those two guys carry the Mets to the playoffs? We'll talk about it in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime, the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And if you haven't gone to a Mets game yet this year, or even if you have, make sure you get out to Citi Field. There's only 3 homestands left, and the Mets are almost halfway through this one. You want to go out to the ballpark, and GameTime is going to get you there with the lowest possible prices on last-minute tickets. When I go to a Mets game, I wait till I'm pretty much walking into the ballpark until I pull open the GameTime app, and I'm always going to find some tickets there for me and great deals. You can look at the view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. There's also all-in prices up front, so you don't have any hidden fees when you go to check out. You see them right there for you. Download the GameTime app today to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, if nothing else, this season is going to be the year that we're all going to look back and remember Francisco Lindor becoming the captain of the New York Mets, the true leader of this team. I have preached this time and again on this show, but it always bears repeating when Francisco Lindor does MVP things. And not just most valuable in hitting a home run and getting a base hit with the bases loaded. Most valuable in how he inspires his teammates, how he handles the media, how he leads in this city where it's not easy. And there's so many things that he does well that don't go recognized. And I think the perfect example of that is not only what he said after the game, we'll get to that in a minute, but also what he did after he hit that home run. The presence of mind as he is rounding first base, actually at that point, rounding second base, to look into the opposing bullpen and to do just very quickly the OMG dance, the celebration. The same thing we've seen the Mets do in the dugout every time someone hits a home run. But it looked unique to me when Lindor did that rounding second base. So he could say he did it to fire up his guys, which was part of what makes Lindor a brilliant leader and brilliant in this market. Because guess what you don't do? You don't take the clipboard material that you have or the bulletin board material and give it right back to the opposition. So he could have after the game said, yeah, I was showing up, Austin Adams for what he did to us the night before. No, he said, oh, no, I'm trying to fire up my own teammates. It was the guys in my bullpen. But we know that's not the case because Lindor has not done that every time he hits a home run. No, he had the presence of mind in that moment to take what might have been a real talking point in that clubhouse before the game. Can't have someone on the A's who didn't make our team showing us up on our field. So when he hits that home run, yeah, look into the bullpen and do that celebration. And then after the game, don't tell the media why you did it, or leave it up to our own interpretation. I thought all of that was fantastic. And then he was asked by Steve Gelbs as part of that media session. He said, does this win take some of the pressure off the Mets? And anyone who's been watching this team over the past week, who watched the way that team was now reacting after winning this game, knows some of that pressure was lifted. But what did Francisco Lindor say? Flatly, real quick, as soon as he asked the question, no, we like the pressure. We love the pressure. It means we are doing something that matters. Keeping that goal present in his teammates' minds, day in, day out, they're playing for something. Keeping them locked in, keeping them focused for the marathon. That's how you can win the marathon. Now, the Mets, they might not be the best team in this race. And you know what? I'd say they certainly aren't the best team in this race. You look at the three teams ahead of them, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Braves. Even with the state that the Braves are in, we'll talk about them in the next segment, they're still a better team than the New York Mets. They have a better bullpen. They have Chris Sale, who is the front runner for the Cy Young. If Max Fried got his act together, he'd be a really good number 2 for them as well. He's been struggling a little bit lately. If they get Ronaldo Lopez back, they're going to have a 1 through 3 in that rotation that is as good as probably any team can roll out there in a wild card series. They also still have some other guys like Spencer Schwellenbach, who's been throwing the ball well for them. And we know what their lineup can do when it's right, even though it hasn't been right this season. The Braves have more talent on paper, and they have the winning pedigree to end up winning this race. And right now, if you had to ask me to put my actual money on it, I don't know if I would put my money on the Mets. Other than the fact that I'm rooting for the Mets, and I wouldn't put my money on the Braves, not because I don't believe in them, but because I never bet for the Braves. But to me, what Lindor is doing this year as a leader deserves all the recognition in the world and deserves MVP votes. Does he deserve it over Ketel Marte or Shohei Ohtani? Probably not. But should he be third in the MVP race this year? Absolutely. Because his offensive numbers might not stack up to the absolute upper echelon of the National League, but I would argue that no player has been more valuable to their team lifting up guys around him the way Lindor has with this team. And this stat was circulating the other day, talking about Lindor's performance in wins versus losses and how he either has a good game and the Mets win or he doesn't and the Mets lose prior to tonight. And tonight was another good game from Lindor. He was batting .333 with a .408 on base and a .631 slug in Mets wins with 18 home runs and 53 RBIs. So what is that now? 19 and 55 RBIs, 19 home runs, 55 RBIs. In losses, He's batting 185, 252 on base, 275 slug. His OPS when the Mets win, over 1,000. When they lose, 527. So nearly doubles his OPS in victories. Now that's going to be similar pretty much anytime you look at a star player splits on a season. Their numbers are always going to be better in wins than losses, really for any player, because if a player hits a 3-run homer, your team has a much better chance to win. That's obvious. But that drastic of splits is not as common. And it shows how important Lindor is to this team. But he can't do it alone. He can't carry them wire to wire. If he could, he would win the MVP. The Mets need somebody else to step up. A week ago today, last Thursday, I did a show where I talked about how the Mets needed a Robin to Lindor's Batman this year. And my call to action was for Brandon Nimmo to step up and be that guy, because over the past couple years, if you look at a lot of the stats, Nimmo in a lot of ways has been the Mets' best hitter. If you look at weighted runs created plus and other metrics like that. But the best run producer on the New York Mets for the past 6 years has been Pete Alonso. There's no doubt about that. And the thing about Pete Alonso is when Pete Alonso's right, he's not Robin, he's Superman, and Lindor's Batman, or vice versa, okay? Those two guys together can be something special. We saw in 2022 where they each had great seasons and the Mets won over 100 games. They need Alonso to match Lindor down the stretch, if not be better than Francisco Lindor down the stretch. They need him to carry the offense. And there was a great article in The Athletic by Tim Britton where he talks about how every single season in Pete Alonso's career, he has had at least one great 30-game stretch. Now, I talked about this a bit on the show, but I've done it month by month, looking at just the splits per month. Like, oh, every year he's got at least 1 month where he hits at least 8 home runs or 9 home runs. And you can see it in RBIs and stuff like that. But Britton made it a 30-game sample. And across his career, every single season, he's had at least one 30-game sample where he hits at least a dozen home runs. I don't think he's ever hit a dozen home runs in a calendar month. But if you look at a 30-game stretch like that, it really does highlight what a hot Pete Alonso can do. So this season, he hasn't done that. He hasn't had a stretch where he's hit 12 home runs in 30 games. What if we get that now? He's hit 3 home runs in his last 6 games. What if we see Pete Alonso hit 9 more in the next 24? That's going to take this team in a really good direction. And you look at his numbers over his last 30 games after a 4-hit day, which your numbers always are going to look significantly better after you get 4 hits. But over the last 30 games played for Pete Alonso, he's hitting 274, 364 on base, 540 slugging percentage. It's a 904 OPS. He has 8 home runs and 20 RBIs. That is a guy that has been on the verge of turning the corner, and to see him get a hit in each at-bat in this game, that is so encouraging. Because if Pete Alonso can get hot down the stretch, as I've been talking about on the show for weeks now, that could be the difference. Pete Alonso is 14 home runs away from 40, 32 RBIs away from 100. I still have this feeling he's going to find his way to those numbers. And if he does, that's going to salvage his free agency. If he could say, despite the contract year, despite everything that was going on, if Scott Boras can say, well, Pete Alonso still, through everything, the pressure cooker of a contract year where everybody was talking about him getting traded from day one, he still put up 40 and 100. That's going to hold a lot of weight this offseason. So this is Pete Alonso's time. He can really salvage his season down the stretch. And if he does that, if he hits 14 home runs over the final 42 games, he drives in 32, there's a good chance the Mets are going to be right there for a playoff spot. The only problem is you have the Atlanta Braves, who might have finally found their footing. I want to talk about the Braves in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because, unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll in. So every day you look at Pete Alonso, you might be able to take his fantasy score, and now that he's getting hot, you take more on it. And if he hits a home run on the game on Thursday, you're probably going to hit that part of your entry, but you got to add some more. You can look at other MLB stars, maybe Juan Soto's fantasy score, or you can look at the WNBA and pick some of the best star players from there. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Today's episode is also brought to you by Liquid IV. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, Liquid IV. What I love about Liquid IV is the convenience and also the taste, not to mention how it makes me feel. For the convenience, you just rip open a pouch, pour it into 16 ounces of water, and you are good to go. And strawberry lemonade is my absolute favorite flavor. I love drinking that after a workout, and it makes me feel so much more hydrated. There's 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink in Liquid IV and 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. Always non-GMO. It's vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. So no more thirsty summers. When you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV, get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. The NL wildcard race is starting to become a more clear picture. The Diamondbacks and the Padres, day after day, win baseball games. Both of them have won 9 of their last 10. The Diamondbacks have won 6 in a row. The Padres have won 3 in a row. Both of these teams have gotten healthy. They've gotten stronger as the year's gone on. The Padres just recently adding Joe Musgrove back into their rotation. The Diamondbacks all of a sudden having Eduardo Rodriguez join their rotation. Jordan Montgomery pitching better. They're going to get Merrill Kelly back at some point, and they have had the best lineup in baseball for a little while now. Meanwhile, the Padres have a good lineup. They got Tatis, they got Merrill, they got Machado swinging it finally. These teams look just flatly better than the rest in the wild card race, and their schedules are also pretty easy. So it feels like those two teams are going to be the 1 and 2 wild card seed unless one of them can knock the Dodgers off, and the Dodgers are one of the top 2 wild card teams. That leaves one spot. Now, the Braves have done the Mets a favor in one respect. They've kept the Giants at bay, who were getting really close to the Mets. Now the Giants are sliding a little bit. But in doing so, the Braves have now moved to 2 games ahead of the Mets. Now, there's a lot of season left. The Mets can gain ground. But we also know this is the Atlanta Braves. And they have that winning pedigree to fall back on. And all of a sudden, we're seeing it. They win 2 games in extra innings against the Giants, and then they just blow them out today, 13-2. Now they're going to try to get the 4-game sweep. Hopefully the Giants can show some fight and grab a game in this series. And if the Mets can win, all right, well, now you're only a game back. But this is a team in Atlanta that has so many parallels to the one that won the World Series in 2021. We had a great article that went up today at justbaseball.com from one of our writers, Zach Warden, talking about that, the parallels, which obviously are Acuna going down with an ACL. This year, Spencer Strider going down as well. A team that was at the deadline in a precarious position when it comes to their playoff spot, making unorthodox additions, both years acquiring Jorge Soler. And after that deadline, starting to find their stride. Now, the Braves were not playing great right after the deadline this year. But now they've won 3 in a row. And you look at what they did that season. They were 37-19 in the second half. They started off the second half 11-14. Deadline happens. They end up going on a 16-2 stretch pretty soon after the trade deadline. They finished the year on a 12-2 stretch over their final 14 games. And they ultimately go from 52-54 at the deadline to 88-73 and they win the NL East, which, funny enough, could still happen this year if the Phillies just continue on this free fall, which would be the best outcome, honestly. If you told me that the Braves are going to win the division and the Phillies somehow fell out of the playoffs, I would love that. If the Mets were the final wild card, if coming down the stretch, it was Mets-Phillies, oh, that would be perfect. As much as I want to see the Braves miss the playoffs too. Really doesn't matter either way, but just because of how cocky and confident Phillies fans were earlier this season, that would be a beautiful thing. But it's not likely. Okay, the Phillies have a ton of talent. So it really does feel like Mets Braves, that's where this is really going to come down to the wire with it. And I will actually say, now counterpoint it as I'm thinking about this, because I was going to say the Mets do have 3 games left against the Braves. They have 7 left against the Phillies. So anything can happen. Anything can happen down the stretch here. But it certainly feels like the Braves are the team that has shown more wars throughout this season that easily could fall out of this thing. But in the article, what Zach points out is in the second half, a lot of these hitters are starting to find it. And that's been the big concern all season. They've been a great team when it comes to pitching all year, the Braves have. But their offense has just been terrible. If you look at the first half to second half, on base percentage, batting average, slugging percentage, you see big jumps pretty much across the board for some of their main guys. Matt Olson, 405 slug in the first half, 512 in the second half. His weighted runs created plus, which measures on a league average of 100, has gone from 97 to 121. So a 24-point jump in WRC plus. Austin Riley has seen a 21-point jump in WRC plus, 80-point jump in slug, on base percentage about the same, batting average about a 20-point jump. Sean Murphy, batting average 50-point jump, on base percentage 110-point jump, slug slight jump, WRC plus about a 45-point jump. Marcelo Zuna has just been great wire to wire. Orlando Arcia, first half WRC plus 56, second half WRC plus 146. That's a 90-point jump in WRC plus. That's huge. Travis d'Arnaud has been better. Jorge Soler, first half is with the Giants, 100 WRC plus, second half, partly with the Giants, and now with the Braves, a 195 WRC plus. And they got Michael Harris back today, who hit a grand slam in his first at bat. So if this Braves lineup starts hitting, who knows what pace the Mets are going to have to keep up with to stay in this race. That's why the time is now. That's why you have to win all these games this week. And this is the point in the season, if you're in the race, where every day it feels like you got to win. And that's awesome. It's going to be a fun ride. I'm excited that we have competitive Mets baseball in the middle of August, which we didn't have last year. I just want to see the exact same situation play out a month from now. I want the Mets to be within 2 games of a playoff spot in the middle of September with a real chance to make the postseason, if not be in position. They got to build on the momentum that they had in this game on Wednesday night. I thought the intensity was perfect. I love to see it. Now, can you win a series and then carry that momentum and beat up on a bad Marlins team? That's what the Mets have to do this week. We stated the goal at the top of the week. Win 5 games. For now, it's still in hand. Hopefully the Mets can really get this thing going because the Braves aren't going to wait for them. The Braves are going to keep winning baseball games one way or the other. So the Mets have to keep pace. We'll see if they can do it. On tomorrow's show, we'll have a Friday Farm Report, and I will break down the final game of this series as well as previewing the weekend slate against the Marlins. So make sure that you don't miss that by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, rate, review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button as well. Trying to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Locked On Sports Today with your local experts from each team, your league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.